Welcome back to the Puckn Pod. On today's episode, we discuss our favorite hockey heroes while growing up watching the NHL. We also discuss our favorite reality TV shows. That's all coming up next right here on the Puckn Pod. Let's puck and go. All right, we're back for another episode of your favorite podcast, the Puckn Pod. Welcome, everybody. Guys, how you feeling?
Feeling pretty good. I've been enjoying a good first week at my new posting up in Parksville today.
Oh, yeah. New job within the same company, but new job still. And how about yourself, Brando?
Yeah, enjoying the last bit of summer here, I think. The weather's, it's good. It's not too hot, which is great. And, work's going good. Things are going well, man.
Awesome. So everybody's doing good. Hopefully our listeners have enjoyed the show. We've been working really hard at making this thing a regular podcast. So, if you guys are enjoying, make sure you check out our social media. We are on Twitter, or X, if you will. We are on Facebook, Instagram, TikTok. We're all sweating because we just did a TikTok. So hopefully you guys
did a couple.
Appreciate the effort we're putting out there because we're definitely working hard.
Pretty soon we're going to be in shape or something.
No, that's never going to happen. Come on, let's be serious. But it's we're just coming to the end of summertime now, and it feels like it should be getting cooler outside. But I tell you what, I'm still sweating bullets here. So,
I mean, your body needs to reacclimatize, I guess, as the temperatures start to cool down. Weather's going to start getting rainy, and I mean, the temperature might still be up, but the rain's we're going to get tired of the rain real quick around here, I think.
For those of you who don't know, we live on the west coast of Canada, on Vancouver Island, and we experience about, 10 months of rain every year, something like that?
The average, I believe, is 268 days a year with rain.
Yeah, that's a lot of rain. We're used to it, though. I know there are people who don't live out here, and they're just like, how can you live in a place like that? But honestly, our trees are green. The grass is green. We've got a lot of beauty in this area, so we don't have a lot to complain about. You get used to the rain, and I think we also have one of the most temperate climates in Canada too.
I mean, Paul, you lived in Alberta. What's the temperature and climate like compared to there?
I will gladly replace 10 months of rain. Replace 10 months of snow from Alberta with the 10 months of rain on the island.
I believe it.
I mean, how frigid does it actually get? I mean, I was in Edmonton for a winter-ish. I mean, I caught the beginning of February, the year I went, and then I stayed until basically the beginning of November. And I was told it was a very mild winter there. I think the coldest that I ever saw it without the wind chill factored in was like minus 17 or minus 18. With the wind chill added, you're talking minus 30 probably, or close to. But like, just how much is it different? I don't think I really experienced an Alberta winter when I was there.
That would definitely have been pretty mild. When it's been at its worst, you're looking at like minus 35, degrees Celsius. That's midwinter, so you're looking at like December, January, where it gets that low.
That is literally terrifying because when I did go out there, which was the beginning of February in 2012, I remember the second day I was there, I had to gas up my car. And I went to get out of the car to go and fuel up. And I did my whole prepaid thing and put however much on. And I started fueling up, and it was literally halfway through. It might have even been like a minute in. I had to let go of the pump and get back into the car and wait a couple of minutes before I could go back out and finish.
Yeah.
I couldn't take it. And it was a beautiful sunny day, but it was the wind underneath kind of like the canvassed gas station. It's just piling through like you're in a tunnel.
Yeah, the wind chill out there can make it even worse. Like, I've seen it like minus 65 with the wind chill. Funny enough, just before I moved out here in 2017, I had to take a first aid course for the program I was taking. On the back of my Honda Fit, they have like a plastic kind of piece that covers over where the latch is for opening the trunk. And I didn't grab the latch on the trunk. I grabbed the plastic piece, and there was about minus probably close to 30, minus 30. Pulled on that, not even any pressure. Pulled the thing right off. Snapped it right off.
Yeah, I can't imagine what. I mean, I'm sure there's people listening to this who might live in those temperatures, but for us, like, that's unheard of. experiencing that on a almost regular basis in the wintertime. If you're American and you're watching this and you're like, well, that's normal for Canada, isn't it? Not every part of Canada is like freaking
igloos and no electricity.
Yeah, and like just dead winter snowstorm ice castles. Like we don't experience that where we live. We don't get to skate on our lakes in the wintertime. Sometimes we do if it gets cold enough, but that's a rarity. So it's definitely a different climate that we're experiencing here.
Pond maybe, lake no.
Yeah. I mean, and even then the pond has to be like higher in elevation. Like there's a pond in the mountain in our town that we live in that people do go skating on, usually in the wintertime because it's a little bit colder up there. So, but speaking of skating and ponds, playing hockey is something you do on a frozen pond. Gentlemen, let's talk a little bit about our favorite hockey players growing up. Being that we're all three very, big hockey fans, we're all sports fans, but hockey fans specifically, let's talk a little bit about who our favorite players were growing up.
So my favorite hockey player, he is pretty well known in both Western and Eastern Canada. He played for two of the Canadian teams there. Actually played for 3 Canadian teams. I'll give you guys maybe just a little trivia. Brandon, you might get this right away. He wore number 93. Played for the Calgary Flames. Played for the Toronto Maple Leafs. Is a Kingston-born player, born in '63. And first started with the St. Louis Blues, but was not traded for Brett Hull. Can you have an idea who that is?
I know who the player is. I will say that it was kind of before my time as a Leafs fan, but it's got to be Dougie Gilmour.
Gilmour, for sure.
Dougie Gilmour.
Yeah, I mean...
As soon as you said 93,
that was my thought process, too. Although I also know that Gilmour played for the Flames as well. It doesn't surprise me that he's your favorite player, considering you cheer for both teams.
That's true.
Did you always cheer for the Flames as a kid?
Yeah, basically when we moved there in 90.
So you were just, like 8 years old or something like that?
7 years old.
7? Yeah.
I'd already been cheering for the Leafs, and I've always cheered for the Leafs, but certainly living in Calgary, everything was the Flames, so you got pretty accustomed to it pretty quick.
Can you, sorry, go ahead.
Oh, I was just going to say, I think I know the answer already, but maybe some of the listeners don't, especially people that may be younger even than me. I'm 37. What was it that Doug Gilmour brought to the table? Like, what made you like him so much?
So with Dougie, he was a heart and soul kind of player, and very, very rugged, very dug into the trenches kind of thing. I think he encapsulated at least what the Leafs were trying to be at that time, which was a hard, rough team. Like they had Wendell Clark, they had all these guys that were a little bit more intense in terms of the way that they played. Funny enough, when Dougie played with Brian Sutter on the Blues at the time, Sutter used to call him Charlie. He meant this as Charles Manson, in reference to the fact that he thought that Dougie played a very mean style of play and almost like a serial killer, he thought. It eventually morphed into Killer, but that nickname Killer stuck with Dougie throughout the rest of his career.
Oh, imagine that. Hey, what's up, Chucky? Oh, Charles.
It's definitely interesting. Like, I never knew that he was drafted by St. Louis. Just looking at his hockey DB right now, it's interesting to find out.
He was drafted in the 7th round, actually, too. And passed over in the first draft that he was eligible for in 1981. He got actually drafted the year following in the 7th round.
Now, I don't want to get too excited about drafting a player who was passed over, but the Canucks just did that this year with a guy named Anthony Romani, who was passed over last year's draft, drafted by the Canucks this year after having an incredible season in the OHL. So, to me, you can't overlook those type of players, right? And
No.
Doug Gilmour is a perfect example of that.
Yeah, and it's understandable why he got passed over in his first year. Like, I'll give you some of his junior stats, which were kind of crazy how much everything changed. His very first year, he played for the Cornwall Royals throughout his 3 years in junior. His very first year, he only had 12 goals, 23 assists, and 35 points for 51 games. How many points do you think he got in the next season with just 16 more games?
I mean, I imagine it's probably going to be a big hike, say 30 more points, say 80 something.
How about you, Joe?
Yeah, I was thinking the same. Like, the way you're setting it up, I'm thinking it's got to be a big number. But yeah, 80. I'll go with 83.
46 goals, 73 assists, 119 points in 67 games.
Almost 100 more points.
Even crazier is the following year. He almost doubled his goals, 70 goals. He had 30 more assists, 107 for 177 points in 68 games. So he played one game more.
That's literally nuts. So not only is it a point a game, which is well over a point a game, it's almost double, but it's it's a little more than a goal a game. Like, that's incredible.
It's back when the goalies didn't even have any equipment. Come on.
This is juniors, but
they were
still.
shooting at plastic men standing there, standing still. No, you're right. It is junior hockey. It's funny because, like, when it comes to like drafting players, the mindset of a fan is always like, this guy had 60 goals in the OHL. He's going to bring that to the NHL, but the NHL is a whole different beast. But a player like Doug Gilmour is a perfect example that, even though you might not score 70 goals, but you're still going to bring that points percentage in the NHL. Not the same, not 177 points, but he did have a 105-point season. He did have a 127-point season with the Leafs. So, clearly he brought something that was a bright spot in the NHL.
To your point, I think, Joe, those intangibles that the player brings, especially when they're being scouted or drafted, like you say, you could have a player that's scoring, 65 goals in junior, 55 assists, he's got 120, 130 points, and that won't translate to the NHL. But you get other players that, say, score 18 goals and have 40 assists, and 39 penalty minutes, but they're a center. Their face-off percentage is 65%. Their plus minus is 40, and they end up drafting them 17th overall. And you're like, who is this guy? He hasn't even done anything. And then he turns out to be a 40-goal scorer in the NHL. It
baffles me when I think about like the way they scout these players, because you see a player like that who he plays down the depth of the team. So like maybe on the fourth line, third line, something like that. But he brings certain intangibles that you as a normal fan don't see. And then he gets drafted into the NHL and he's just coached properly. And that's all it takes, right? And a player like Doug Gilmour, he brought everything from the OHL to the NHL. So it's kind of nice. And I'm sure a lot of it does play into coaching and into, his specific, like you say, intangibles that he brings. But it's just incredible to see that, I think.
Yeah, and like over his career, like he was a really good player. Like he had over 1,400 points in his entire career. Like,
how many games did he play in the NHL in total?
1,474. Wow, so he was basically a point a game
just shy,
player.
Right? Just shy of a point a game.
He did actually
for his entire career.
He did actually have one other 100-point season. Do you know which team he had that with?
I'm gonna guess Calgary.
St. Louis. So it was just a couple years after he had been drafted by them. I see.
Wow.
Yeah,
close though.
105 points in that year.
Now he went to Calgary after he left St. Louis.
That's right.
Yeah, so with him, he actually had been traded quite a few times in his career, as well as different signings and stuff as well.
Clearly a wanted player, though.
Clearly a wanted player.
It makes you wonder why that stat comes up. You're like, oh, he's been traded 6 times. Yeah, but he scores 100 points a year.
Exactly.
Well, why is he traded? Well, because everybody needs him.
The problem is with teams. This is the thing that people don't think about. The problem is with teams is that they don't have supporting players around them. So they might be in a phase where they need to start rebuilding. So they trade a player like him because they need the assets that he'll bring. Right. So yeah, it doesn't surprise me that he's been traded that often, and he's getting points everywhere he goes.
So he did play for 7 different teams in his career. Started off with St. Louis. He got traded in the offseason to Calgary for Mike Bullard, Tim Corkery, and Craig Cox went back to St. Louis. St. Louis got Steve Bozak, Michael Dark, Doug Gilmour, and Mark Hunter, former assistant GM of the Maple Leafs.
Mark Hunter. I love Hunter. London Night Boy.
Absolutely. He played with Calgary from 88-89 to 91-92 season. He won the Stanley Cup with them in 89. Got traded to Toronto for now current coach Craig Berube.
The Chief.
Isn't that hilarious?
The Chief.
It's funny how things come full circle like that. Well, now, how long do we have to wait before Gilmour becomes a coach of the Leafs?
Exactly.
like an assistant coach or even like a GM or something.
I'm not sure he's coaching that much.
Is he though? Like, I wonder what he is doing.
I can definitely allude to that.
Oh, okay. I apologize.
I will absolutely get through some of the moves for him here. So I got Craig Berube was in that deal. Alexander Godenick, I don't know who that is. Gary Lehman, I remember that guy at the time. Michael Petit, which also played for the Flames. I remember watching him play. Same with Jeff Reese, who also
How
played
tall
for the
was
Leafs.
Michael Petit?
I think he was taller than Petit. And the Leafs got back, and I remember these players very well because I watched them play in the 92-93 and in 93-94 playoffs. So they got Dougie Gilmour, Jamie McCown, awesome defenseman, super rugged. Kent Manderville, which was an underrated scorer. Rick Natras, I didn't see too much about, and Rick Walmsley. He did play in Toronto from 92 to the 96-97 season. During the lockout that they had in 94-95, he did play in Switzerland for a bit. He was a two-time All-Star with the Leafs in 93-94, won the Selke with them in 93, but was traded at the deadline to the New Jersey Devils. The Leafs got Jason Smith back, Steve Sullivan, which I remember him playing for the Leafs before he got moved over to Nashville, and Alan McCauley. Dave Ellett and Gilmore, as well as the conditional pick, went back to New Jersey. It is a little too bad that he didn't win the cup with New Jersey, because considering they had Brodeur and they were a cup-winning team at the time, but played for New Jersey for a year, and before he signed with Chicago the following season. With that team, he played for about a year, got traded to Buffalo for Michael Grosick. So it was Gilmore and J.P. Dumont that got traded from Michael Grosick to Buffalo, my apologies. So from Chicago, he got traded to Buffalo for Michael Grosick. So Michael Grosick went to Chicago. J.P. Dumont and Doug Gilmour went back to Buffalo. Played with Buffalo for about a year. Then signed with Montreal in the offseason. So that was the 2001 offseason. He played for 2 years. Got traded back to Toronto for a 6th-round pick, which eventually was Mark Flood, who did play for the Winnipeg Jets for a bit. And his last trade, which still makes me sad, he got traded back to the Leafs, played 5 minutes. Into his second shift, he had an inadvertent collide with Dave Lowry, tore his ACL, and that was it for his career.
Man, that's a sucky way to go out. That's a sucky way to end your career on an injury. This is the dangers of hockey. Hockey is such a physical, fast-paced game. Anybody can get hurt at any time. It's unfortunate, but he did have a pretty damn amazing career. So
He did. And he did go into the coaching ranks after. He did want to keep his career going. Unfortunately, the not-so-good GM at the time, John Ferguson Jr., I won't use any swears, sorry guys, didn't want to resign him, so he chose to retire instead, which kind of sucks, but can't really do much about that.
What year was that?
That would have been...
97 is my guess.
97.
No, it was later than that. It was like 2000, would have been 2003.
Okay, so 03... Where were the Leafs in 03? What was their... Were they in rebuild mode at that point?
No, not until 05, I would say.
Right after the lockout.
04 was their last kind of big run. That was the year that they played Philadelphia in the Eastern Conference Final. And I think it was Jeremy Roenick that won it in overtime for Philadelphia in Game 7.
No, the reason why I ask is because, I'm trying to put myself in the GM's shoes for a second and kind of think, why wouldn't he re-sign him? Give him one more chance to finish his career properly, right?
There was no salary cap at that time.
Yeah,
the Leafs were famous for buying their teams, like the Yankees.
Yeah.
Right? There was no... I mean, in baseball, you have the penalty, the cap penalty.
But the reason why I ask ultimately is because, maybe he thought to himself, he's not coming back from this injury, and I can't afford to spend the salary cap, even though there is no salary cap, but I can't afford to spend the salary on him just for him not to play. Just a sort of thought process in my mind. But then at the same point, maybe also it wasn't just his decision.
Yeah.
Like maybe the owners of the team were saying, don't re-sign him, spend the money elsewhere, et cetera, et cetera. I don't know, but just a possibility.
I imagine ownership always plays a part in that. And the Leafs obviously were one of the more rich teams at the time, and maybe they thought they would lose money because he wouldn't be the same player. Who knows?
Exactly. He's not going to bring the intangibles that he's known for, which is unfortunate. It's unfortunate that it has to go that way for him specifically. Like, not being able to end your career, not to give yourself that swan song,
Yeah.
And I think that's the thing that, like I don't mean to bring this back to the Canucks, but just from what I relate it to, the Canucks announced recently that they're going to be retiring Alex Edler. They're signing him for 1 day so he can retire a Canuck. That's how I feel like all players should finish their career, get a chance to say goodbye to the fans. And it's really unfortunate Gilmore didn't get that chance with the Leafs.
Yeah, he did have a post-career. So right about 3 years after he retired, he was actually a Leafs player development advisor from 2006 to 2008. Was the Marlies head coach from 2008 or assistant coach from 2008 for a couple of months, and then up to the Kingston Frontenac's head coach from 2008 to 2011.
I did not know that.
Was the Kingston Frontenac's GM from 2011 to 2017. Was also their president from 2017 to 2019. And since 2019 has been back with the Leafs as a community representative.
Yeah. I knew he was within the organization. I didn't think it was in a coaching role, but
yeah, there's a lot of ex-players that are kind of in that role now with teams. Vancouver has Kirk McLean as their community representative.
Yeah.
So whenever the Canucks do something within the community, he goes along and joins them and stuff, which is pretty cool.
I love that. I think that's incredible.
I do too. Yeah, I think that's great.
Some of my favorite things about Dougie. His jersey is retired by the Leafs back in 2016.
As it should be.
So no.
I think the Flames should retire his jersey too.
Yeah, they should, considering he won a cup. I know they got Lanny's up in the rafters, but they haven't got Dougie's, which they should. He was part of the 2 fastest goals scored ever by opposing teams. So back in 1987, when St. Louis was playing against Boston, Ken Lintzman on Boston scored at 1950 in the third period. 2 seconds later, Dougie Gilmour scored for St. Louis.
2 seconds later.
Did he shoot it off the draw?
I have no idea.
Wow.
But
You gotta look that up.
Looked at that stat. I thought that was pretty cool.
That is cool.
2011 Hall of Fame inductee. He won the Gold Cup in 1987 with Canada. One of my favorite, and I remember seeing this actually on Hockey Night in Canada. So one of my favorite things was that Don Cherry kissed him on the cheek once on air, calling him the greatest hockey player ever.
What a guy!
I'll never wash this cheek again.
I remember watching that.
What a beauty!
And him and Cherry always had like a really good relationship.
Yeah.
Gilmore he stated this in an interview that he always thought that part of the reason why Grapes, which Don Cherry was known as Grapes
Nickname,
as well,
yeah.
nickname, was always more of in favor of Dougie's, that Don Cherry actually coached Dougie's brother for the Rochester Americans.
Is that right?
And
I didn't know that.
His parents went to school with Don Cherry as well.
Hmm.
So I always thought that was kind of a cool little thing.
No wonder he thinks he's a beauty.
He also mentioned one thing about Don Cherry, that he had a bit of amusing superstition. He mentioned that when the Flames won, or in the playoffs and won the Cup in 1989, he mentioned that we won the Cup. I had to shake his hand before every game in the playoffs. If I didn't shake his hand, we lost.
Oh, well, there you go. And athletes are all very, very superstitious. They have those little things they've got to do before each match to make sure that they win and stuff. So that's interesting to include Don Cherry in that. I'm sure Grapes loved that, being included in that. But yeah, Doug Gilmour.
Yeah,
definitely. I can see why he would be a favorite player of yours. I enjoyed watching him play too. I like Doug Gilmour. Again, I grew up a hockey fan, so for me, all these big players you love to watch. I loved watching, Gretzky and all these players. But yeah, it's definitely interesting. I definitely can see why you would cheer for a guy like that.
So one of my favorite memories of Dougie that will always stick with me, and I watched the playoffs, is where he scored from behind the net, did a wraparound on Curtis Joseph against St. Louis, and scored the overtime winner that won the series.
Of course he did. Of course he did that. What Paul is referring to is that Curtis Joseph is my favorite player.
Yeah.
I loved Cujo growing up.
Yeah,
I mean, honestly, right when I kind of started watching the Leafs all the time, I tried real hard not to be a Leafs fan. I can't believe I'm going to admit this on the internet, but I will say this, and I think my parents still have the blanket that they bought me for Christmas. I tried to be a Habs fan
Yeah.
just to be different from my dad.
Yeah.
That did not last very long.
I think that's a common practice amongst kids because you're trying to develop your own personality as a human being. So your mindset is, I'm going to do whatever the opposite of what my parents do. So yeah, I totally get that. My dad, for example, is a football fan. He does not watch hockey. So I love hockey. I still love football, but I love hockey. And I know a lot more about hockey than my dad thinks he knows. So I totally get that.
Definitely cheering for the Habs would be the polar opposite of cheering for the Leafs.
100%.
100%. But Curtis Joseph, growing up, my absolute favorite player. I think in a time in the NHL where positioning still wasn't in the forefront for goaltenders. It wasn't the thing that was. I mean, you had goalie coaches, but the drills you were doing side to side, your edge work, like it wasn't really how goalies were taught and how goalies were. We're literally at that point just coming out of the stand-up style still.
Yeah,
and this is where the butterfly kind of started to take off, and we're talking like the mid to late 90s, right? Now, my favorite part of Curtis Joseph's career obviously was when he was with Toronto.
Yeah.
I don't know a ton about him prior to that other than, doing a little bit of background research, but the 98 season when the Leafs signed, or 98, 99, I guess, when they signed him, and I guess he really only played there for 4 years, but that was exactly the time where the Leafs were dominating the Eastern Conference every year. Yeah. They were an exciting team to watch. They had Ty Domi, they had Matt Sundin, they had a couple of years later, they had Alex McGillney and Gary Roberts, and then post Cujo, of course, that's when the Ed Belfour days started, which was still incredible to watch and fun for me as a Leafs fan.
Yeah.
But I always found, and I was always drawn to goaltenders as a young kid, I guess, or a teenager even. I have no idea why. Actually, that's a lie. I do know why. And it's because my dad played goaltender when he played floor hockey, because he was in a league every Wednesday night with the guys from his work, and he was the goalie every week, and that's what he played. And so whenever we'd play hockey in gym class or even like indoor soccer, I always wanted to be the goalie. And guys like Cujo were kind of that inspiration. If I want to allude to him, Dominic Hasek at the time, for the Buffalo Sabres, just the acrobatics and the jumping all over the place and flailing your arms and stacking the pads. It's just, for me, that was the most incredible part of watching the goaltenders play. And Martin Brodeur, those guys, Patrick Waugh, it's just, just an incredible time.
That is the best part about stand-up style hockey, is the literal athletics of it all. Because you're making desperate save after desperate save. Stacking the pads was huge back then.
It was, yeah.
I'll never forget, and I'm sure you as a Leaf fan remember this, but 94 playoffs against Vancouver, Flames in Vancouver, when Kirk McLean stacked the pads and made that incredible save against the Flames. And then I think the Canucks ended up going back to win the series, like right after that. It was incredible. And that was the best part about stand-up style hockey. Now, it would be incredibly frustrating to watch. I feel like with the way the guys score goals now, it'd be like, games would end like
10-9.
Yeah, games would end like 15-16, like
kind of the way they did in the 80s, in the powerhouse Edmonton Oilers days.
That's right. Yeah.
The thing about Curtis Joseph that I always think about is how small of a goaltender he was. It says he's listed at 5'11". I'm not sure he was 5. Maybe on skates. And I can just picture watching him back in the day, like you say, the whole pad stacking thing where the guy's coming in on a breakaway and Cujo's just kind of backing up and the legs are close together because he's so short, and he just makes one move, and if it's the save, it's the save. It's not, it's in, right? And just, I could picture it in my head, the heydays of him and how just the glove hand, and even I can't remember who it was. It might have been Mick Magoo, where he flipped out after a call. The goal was counted, and he chased right after him and took him down. And oh my goodness, he must have got suspended for that. I don't actually know the answer, but
I feel like back then players could do whatever the hell.
Yeah,
they
that's
wanted.
true.
Might have gotten fined.
Yeah,
maybe got fined. Yeah. Back then it was probably $500, which is a steak dinner for the players these days. So quite literally interesting stat. I bet you guys probably don't know this. Curtis Joseph was born literally within weeks of the very last time the Leafs won the Stanley Cup.
Is that right?
Yeah.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, he was
67?
67. He was born April 29th.
Wow.
Yeah. And the Stanley Cup was awarded, I believe, on May 2nd. So it was actually days, not even weeks.
Yeah.
Ontario-born guy. He was 5'11" in his career, 190 pounds. Kind of, like I said, small guy. Quite a career. He had 6 teams he played for. The Blues, the Oilers, Leafs, Red Wings, Coyotes, and the Flames. It's interesting. I bet you I'd want to know what the stat is about the players that have played for both the Oilers and the Flames. Kind of the same way about the Leafs and the Senators, right?
Yeah.
I'd be curious to know that battle, but particularly the Oilers and the Flames. Just that's that whole Battle of Alberta thing.
Yeah, nuts. For sure. Being that they're such polar opposites of each other, But it's so funny. Like even now in today's hockey, you're still seeing players go from one team to the other, and it still feels weird. Like Mike Smith when he went from Calgary to Edmonton, it was just like, huh? Do they really? He wants to play for those guys, but it's just funny how that works.
Same with Cam Talbot; he switched between the two teams
true.
too.
Yeah. Goaltenders kind of jump around, I think, because a lot of teams really need that strong goaltending tandem that they can get, right. So it makes sense, I think, in today's hockey for sure.
You could probably argue that goaltenders move around more towards the end of their careers too.
Yes, definitely.
They're still a good enough goaltender that they could be a backup on a team looking for some extra help.
Yeah.
So they move around more, signing 1-year contract after 1-year contract after 1-year contract. We see it all the time, even now.
Yeah.
Even now we see it a lot.
Cujo did that quite a bit, didn't he, at the end of his career there?
So Cujo did do that basically from the year 2001 to 2009, which was basically the end of his career. He played for 4 different teams and 5 teams in total in basically an 8-year span. He played for the Leafs twice. He actually ended his career with the Leafs. And he played for the Red Wings for a couple of seasons. And then right after Detroit, he signed in Phoenix and played for the Coyotes for 55, 60 games or something like that in the 07 year. And then the year after that, I lied to you. Sorry. He played for the Calgary Flames as well between 07 and 08. He only played 9 games though. And then he played 21 games in his last year again with Toronto. So yeah, he kind of moved around a lot in the last 7 or 8 years of his career. Like I said, 4 or 5 different teams.
Which, like you say, I think is a thing goaltenders do a lot of when they come to the end of their career or toward the end of their career, because a lot of times, a team that's drafted the goaltender is developing another goaltender at the same time. And so they try to move on so they can recoup that asset, whether it's a draft pick, whether it's a good player in return kind of thing. It makes a lot of sense that would be what they do. There are goalies who stay with teams. I mean, Hasek was traded, but he did stay with Buffalo for a really long time.
He did.
I think he only got traded to Detroit, right? Am I right in saying that? Did he? Yeah, so he signed as a UFA to Detroit?
And he signed with Ottawa as well.
He played for Ottawa?
He did.
Okay, that's news to me.
Yeah, so Dominic Hasek was signed by Detroit. He played 2 seasons there. Then Ottawa signed him for 1 season.
I don't remember him playing for Ottawa.
And then he went back and played with Detroit for 2 more seasons.
Crazy, yeah. So there you go. I mean, even the best goalies in the league, get moved around, and it makes sense. I mean, a lot of these teams, they're trying to develop goalies and try to keep their team young and keep their team competing, and so goalies will get moved. I have a firm belief that at some point here, Thatcher Demko will probably get moved out of Vancouver. They've got Archer Shilovs coming up. They've got Nikita Tolopilo coming up, and these are good goalies, and they've got good goaltending coaching, and they seem to draft really good goaltenders. So it's nice to see. For me, it doesn't make sense that they would keep Shilovs, move Shilovs and keep Demko. I mean, you want to stay young, you want to stay competitive, and it makes sense that that's what you're going to do, especially with the young core that they have right now.
I'll just finish up with mentioning about Cujo. A couple of small stats, and then I'll tell a funny story. He was an All-Star 3 times. I actually thought it was more than that, but it was only 3 times. It was 94, 99, and 2000. So 2 of those years, it was when he was with Toronto. And he won the King Clancy Memorial Trophy in 2000. That's the one for like leadership qualities and stuff on and off the ice, and contributions to the community. And then he won a gold medal with Canada at the 2002 Olympics. So that was kind of some highlights of his career, I would say. I have a funny story about Cujo, and I'm going to ask you a question, Paul, specifically. Joe, I mean, you may know the answer, but it's unlikely. In the year 2000 was my first ever time seeing the Leafs in Vancouver that I can remember. I'm pretty sure I could ask my mom and dad. Who knows? I'm pretty sure that we went to a game in like 93 or 94 in Vancouver, but I don't really remember it. That was when they were playing at the Coliseum? Pacific Coliseum, I think. That was before GM Place, right?
They moved to they moved to GM Place, now Rogers Arena, in 1995, 96.
Yeah, so it was definitely before that. I'm pretty sure it was the Pacific Coliseum. We went and saw them play. And I'm pretty sure my cousin got a puck during warm-up, and of course she wouldn't give it to me, but that's okay. And so the year 2000, my dad used to get tickets from work every year. We went 3 years in a row, I think. 2 of them were Leafs games. Awesome. The other one was a Detroit game. We went in the year 2000, and I was so excited because Cujo was my favorite player. This was the second year with the Leafs. It was going to be a great night. And do you know who their backup goalie was at that time? If you were to take a guess.
What year? 2000?
Year 2000.
Was it Glenn Healy?
It was Glenn Healy.
I was going to be like,
so I am so pumped to go to this game. I had my Leafs t-shirt. I think I went and bought a Vancouver Canucks puck hat.
Yeah.
I don't know why I did that.
For the memory.
I just thought it was cool, yeah. I had a little mini stick with me. I show up for warm-up, get ready to play. Who the hell does Pat Quinn start? Glenn Healy, not Curtis Joseph. And Curtis Joseph's at the other side, right? So this is the Leafs are on the right-hand side of the benches, and I'm on the left-hand side of the Canucks bench in the lower bowl. I can't even see Curtis Joseph, and this sieve is playing in net. The Leafs lost 6-2.
Oh man,
yeah, fun, hey?
Man,
you know what's funny? I'm sure they played Calgary the game before that. Exact same thing. I wanted to see Cujo play, and they had Glenn Healy in it.
Yeah,
and I took my buddy John at the time to go see the game. And I was like pissed. I'm like, why the F do they have Glenn Healy in it? I want to see Cujo. He's like, calm down, man. I'm like, no, I'm not going to calm down. I want to see Cujo.
Yeah.
This is the problem with cheering for goaltenders, guys. It's a 50-50 shot.
It really is.
That's hilarious. I have my favorite player. So I cheer for the Vancouver Canucks. My favorite player growing up was actually not a member of the Vancouver Canucks. And he never played for the Vancouver Canucks. However, he was one of the best centers in the league. Can you guess who I'm speaking of? If you remember the first episode of our podcast, I did say I cheered for another team growing up.
Oh, yes, it clicked. I got it now. I'm not going to say it, but I do know who it is.
Another man who is 5'11". You talked about Cujo being 5'11". 5'11", 185 pounds, drafted in 1983, the year after I was born, 4th overall in the first round, Mr. Steve Yzerman.
Steve Yzerman.
He's always been my favorite player. He's one of my favorite GMs right now too, actually. But that being said, he's definitely I grew up being a huge Steve Yzerman fan. For me, it was just sort of like, who can I cheer for that isn't Wayne Gretzky? I was very anti-Gretzky because I, of course, was not an Oiler fan and I was against the Oilers. But just Steve Yzerman, for me, embodied what a centerman was in the NHL. And it's one of the reasons why if I ever played hockey, I was playing center. If I ever envisioned myself playing hockey growing up, I wanted to be a centerman because I wanted to be just like Steve Yzerman. Yeah, he's a right shot just like me. He's from Cranbrook, which is a city in BC. So he's a BC guy just like me. Yes. For me, incredible, career in the NHL. He won 3 cups with the Red Wings, 1996, 97, 97, 98, and 2001, 2002. And I swear to God, all 3 of those were against the Avalanche. I swear to God. The 2 hottest teams in the NHL during that time, Detroit and Colorado.
They hated each other.
Absolutely hated each other. And I hated Colorado because I was a Red Wings fan. So, and it's funny because even being a Canuck fan, I hated Colorado because they always beat Vancouver because they were such a good team. The very first NHL game I ever went to, and I didn't go to an NHL game till I was in my 20s. It was 2009 or 2010 I went to my first game. I got to see whatever year it was that they signed Matt Sundin. Vancouver did, because I got to see Matt Sundin play in a Canucks uniform.
It's 2010.
And it was, so it was 2010, and I got to see them play Colorado, and Colorado just destroyed them. So I was just like, curse you, Colorado. But it was exciting to go to my very first game. Growing up, we didn't have the money to go. So, it was like tickets were expensive even back then. But now they're even just, I don't know if I'll ever get to go to another NHL game.
It's
the way
astronomical,
prices are.
yeah.
That being said, Steve Yzerman was the guy I grew up idolizing. So I was a Detroit fan as well as a Vancouver fan because of Steve Yzerman. But I also cheered for a goaltender as well, Mike Vernon, who I think you as a Flames fan would recognize.
Yep.
I thought Mike Vernon was incredible as a goalie for the Red Wings. Again, I cheered for the Red Wings, so for me it was like, what other aspects of the team can I cheer for? Brandon Shanahan, a Maple Leaf. He's a Maple Leaf now, but Red Wings, also a Red Wings player, and then Sergei Fedorov. Like, they had a really incredible team in Detroit, and it was all based upon Steve Yzerman. I can't say enough things about him, but the one thing I'll say is that the guy had some real hockey IQ. And I think this is what I loved about cheering for him, is like he knew when to make the right pass, he knew when to shoot, and whenever he did shoot, it was typically going in the net.
Well, he knew where he had to be at all times.
He knew where he had to be at all times, and he had a hell of a shot. Like that slapper. I don't know if you remember. There's a replay or a highlight that's out there on the internet where Yzerman's coming down the wing, and the camera angle is just sort of perfect for, you can see the goalie and the net, and then there's Yzerman taking a slapper in the top left corner of the screen, and the puck just goes right through, and you can see it the whole way, and it goes right past the goalie into the net. It's a beautiful, beautiful thing. It's like, that's the epitome of my fandom for Steve Yzerman, is the way that guy played. And he's deservedly in the Hall of Fame. He's deservedly recognized for what he did. And so, I'm a big Steve Yzerman fan.
Interesting, at the time where Detroit and Colorado were at wits with each other.
Oh, man.
Another BC boy led Colorado.
That's right.
Joe Sakic.
That's right.
Who also had one hell of a shot.
Burnaby Joe.
And, it's funny because I could have chosen Sakic to cheer for too. To be fair, he grew up closer to me than Yzerman did. But there was something about Yzerman, and I think maybe it was just the fact that he wasn't the tallest guy, the fact that he wasn't, he was a centerman, he was a right-handed shot. Just there was something about him that made me really kind of gravitate towards him. But if I were to choose my favorite Canuck of all time, I'll say Trevor Linden is definitely up there. Again, because he's a centerman, because he's an amazing two-way guy. He had amazing hockey IQ. He played with Vancouver most of his career. So Trevor Linden, drafted by Vancouver, second overall in 1988. So that's the highest draft pick Vancouver's ever had, by the way. Second overall. Played for Vancouver from 88-89 all the way to 97-98. Then he was traded to New York Islanders. Played there for 2 seasons. Then he got traded to Montreal, played there for 2 seasons. Then he got traded to Washington and played there for 2 seasons. Then finally got traded back to Vancouver, and he finished his career from 2001, 2002, all the way to 2007 and 2008. And I'll never forget his last game. The Canucks got smoked by Calgary. Smoked. I can't remember. It was like 8-3 or something like that. It was insane. Oh. But the one thing I'll never forget is, and this is, the epitome of the player that Jerome McGinley was, the captain that Jerome McGinley was, is that he made his team stay on the ice and shake Trevor Linden's hand. And as a Canuck fan, I'll never forget that.
Major respect.
Major respect.
Yeah.
7-1.
Yeah, so it was a drumming for sure. I remember watching it. I was so frustrated, but then I, crying at the end, watching Linden shake the hands of all those Flames and realizing I'm never going to see that guy play again. It was heartbreaking because he was one of my favorite players for sure. So I do have a favorite Canuck. I do have a favorite player. For me, Yzerman was my favorite player growing up. He was the one that I sort of thought, if I were to play hockey, this is the guy I would, I would try to resemble the most if I were to play. I never did play, but if I were to, that's the kind of guy I would look after. So
one of the things I can remember about Yzerman, he he had kind of a mean look to him, but he was a really nice guy. He always had a mean look to him. But he's always like very laser focused, very laser focused on what he was doing. Like you couldn't unshake him.
And that's honestly like that's what makes a player. That's what makes the best players in the league the best players. You look at Jonathan Toews in Chicago. You know, Captain Serious was his nickname because what he was doing was he was focusing on what the task was at hand, right? And so that's, for me, that's what makes good players good players.
I can think of probably one of the most iconic Canadian hockey players ever, if not one of the most iconic hockey players ever in our generation, still playing today, recently just re-signed. Exactly the same player, Sidney Crosby.
Yeah.
Exactly the same. All business, all the time.
I feel like we could do a whole podcast talking about Crosby.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah, very much. Even the battle that you'd have with Alex Ovechkin, too, on top of all that.
But, I mean, he's never been phased. This is going on a tangent, but he's never been phased by anything, Crosby.
No.
He's never been phased. He's always been very, very focused, very determined. And I give him a lot of respect as a hockey fan. Like,
He's had an absolute roller coaster of a career. Look at the injuries he had early in his career.
Concussions.
Early to mid of his career.
Yeah.
The concussions. I think he had shoulder problems. He's overcome so much and still produced at the highest level every single year.
Yeah. How many people in their late 30s do you see produce almost 100-point seasons still? Like, that's unheard of these days.
Easily. He still skates well. He's the same type of player that, recency bias, but John Tavares.
Yeah.
They're not the quickest. Crosby skates way better than Tavares does. But they're not the quickest guys, but they know where to be. They know how to position their puck. They know how to protect the puck. Nobody can get them. Nobody can stop them.
I think a lot of that, too, like, you know, for today's youth, like, to learn that style of hockey, it's really just IQ. It's just hockey IQ. It's knowing where to be and being there. You know, and also hands. Like the guy can hit pucks out of the air like you wouldn't believe, and he can make plays out of nothing. That's important. That's an important skill, but that's something you learn on your own from the IQ aspect, right? So just knowing where to be and making sure you're there.
Always thinking 2 to 3 steps ahead.
Yeah. Reading the game, right? You have to read what's happening on the ice, or
understanding the methods of your teammates, and you know what that guy's going to do with the puck, and I know I need to be here because he's gonna see me open and be able to pass it to me and get it to me, quick enough with a fast enough pass and things like that. So
now think about this from a different perspective. If you take them off the ice and how they handle themselves there, the way they train, the way they eat, the way they present themselves, the way they are with the media, the way they handle the players on and off the ice. All these people we're talking about are captains.
Yeah.
Or former captains.
Yep.
That's true.
You know, for that matter. These people are leaders, and they prove it in every aspect of their game, whether it's on the ice or off.
Yeah, I agree, and I think that's one of the reasons why we followed and cheered for the players we followed and cheered for. You know, for me, watching Steve Yzerman handle himself not only on the ice but off the ice too, you kind of go, I really look up to that guy. I respect everything he does. You know, so for me, that was the big reason behind following a guy like him.
Yeah, that would make perfect sense in regards to the type of players that you want to cheer for, right? The ones that are basically writing the game as they play. Like you can have the star players, you can have the guys that score a lot of goals and such, but there's a character to the game, and those players like Yzerman, like Joe Sakic, like Paul Kariya, any of those big name players, they went above and beyond just the stats, right? They brought character to the game.
You know, fellas, I noticed a lot last season, a lot of cameras following some of the teams around. The Canucks had some cameras following around. I think what I heard was that there's some documentary series, that a little behind-the-scenes reality show that they might be making for Amazon Prime. Have you guys noticed that?
Oh, totally. I think the Leafs did one 2 seasons ago. I think it was an 8-episode release.
Yeah.
The same year that they traded for Nick Foligno, and he had back problems, right. And there was an entire episode of how he was so disappointed because all he wanted to do was play for the Leafs and bring that game that he plays to the Leafs, because that's exactly what they needed at the time. And it's a really good series. But yeah, I think it's been happening a little bit more, obviously, with the streaming services being the way to watch television these days.
For sure.
And how hockey, especially in Canada, is so prevalent that they're doing it a lot now, I think.
Well, yeah, if you watch like anything, everyone's watching anything YouTube or TikTok related these days, right? So they're wanting to be involved in your lives, and you're looking at, again, hockey players, basketball players, whichever docuseries is on, you're getting to follow what's happening in these players' lives outside of the game that they're playing.
Yeah, it's really interesting. I like to watch that stuff, the behind the scenes stuff, but I'm also a big reality TV fan. Like, I watch a lot of reality TV shows. Do you guys have reality TV shows that you love to watch?
I would say for sure. There's several. I can think of one or two that stick out for me more than others. But what I will say before that is that if you do watch reality shows, whether it be on YouTube or whatnot, you should also check out the Puckn Pod. We're on Twitter, X, YouTube, Facebook, Instagram. And you can catch all our podcasts on Apple Music, YouTube, Spotify.
That's true.
iHeartRadio, and catch us anytime. But
we'll even throw a few funny TikToks at you.
Yeah. We're definitely working on that, and we're going to become part of your reality.
So yes, this was a commercial for our show, but it was also a segment that we're discussing reality TV shows. So what reality shows do you particularly stick to?
So what I will say is probably the one that I watch the most or the most religiously is Hell's Kitchen. I've been a big fan of Hell's Kitchen since I think it was 2004 was the first season. It might have been 2003. And I've watched every season, some of them multiple times. It's become Tiff and I's dinner routine. If we're looking for something to just kind of pass the time while we're eating dinner, we'll just turn on an episode of Hell's Kitchen and then, work our way through the season and find another season that we haven't seen in a while and start that. It's just kind of kill time. But I love that show, but it's not my favorite. And my favorite really only started about 6 years ago, and that's The Amazing Race Canada.
Oh, yeah. Okay.
I just think it's so incredible how you can have such diverse people, whether it be on your same team or not, compete in the same competition, and there's different results every single show. You could be the worst team on one show, not get eliminated, and then you win the next leg. And the other thing about it that I really like is not only the challenges, they're pretty unique. If you haven't watched The Amazing Race Canada, you can stream it
on demand.
Period. On demand, period. But you get to see the entire country. There's been times where they've landed in Nanaimo. I can think of twice where they've landed in Nanaimo, and one of the places they have to go is like Petroglyph Park.
Yeah.
Just kind of as you're heading south of Nanaimo. And different challenges and roadblocks and things that they do. They basically have segments within the show, if you haven't seen it, where they do different types of challenges, and it's kind of the same every episode. And then usually your partners have to switch. After, if one person does one thing, like one roadblock it's called, then the next challenge, like a U-turn or something, the other person has to do the challenge. And there are different things along the way where you can, if you get to a board first, you can grab another team that's behind you and put them up for a U-turn, and then they basically have to either wait for another team to come before they're allowed to go, or there's like an allotted amount of time that they're not allowed to go for. Like it might be, say, 30 minutes that they have to wait. All sorts of different things like that are pretty cool. And lots of brain puzzles. It's a pretty physical race too. And like I said, just kind of seeing the entire country, and it's all Canadian people. Yeah. It's just, have you guys watched much of Amazing?
Yeah, I've seen it. So do you favor that one over, say, the American Amazing Race because it's Canadian, because it takes place in Canada?
I think yes. I think that's what drew me to it initially, for sure. I haven't seen an episode of any of the American Amazing Race.
Interesting.
So it's definitely something that Tiff and I will probably do this winter, as
you've seen all the other ones anyway.
You spend a lot more time indoors in the winter. You got to kill time, right? And hockey will take up a lot of time.
Of course,
as well.
yeah.
Has to. But did you ever watch Amazing Race at all, Paul?
I think I've watched more of the American than I have the Canadian. I have seen the Canadian. To be honest, watching Amazing Race, one of my favorite things to watch on Amazing Race, whether it's been American or Canadian, is some of the mishappenings that can happen at times.
Like people fighting and stuff, or
It could be accidents that have happened, wrong ways they've gone, and they've gone in the wrong direction
I
for
see.
like a day,
Yeah.
kind of
So
thing.
you
And
like watching people fail.
it's kind of a fail. I remember one episode. It was the American version, but there was one episode where it was two sisters and they were having to launch watermelons, and so the one sister is sitting down, she's pulling back, launches watermelon, lets it go, but it got stuck in the basket, came back and shot back in her face.
I love
And
it.
you literally see the watermelon explode in her face, and she's down and out. And her sister's like, "Oh, are you okay?" She's like, and the sister that got hit in the face, she's like, "I can't feel my face. What's going on?"
That's hilarious.
Another cool thing just to mention about The Amazing Race. I'm assuming it's the same in the US version, but in Canada, on the legs, you're given basically like a certain amount of cash, and you're capped out. Everybody gets the same amount.
Yeah, like you can only spend this much money on travel and
For
things like that.
taxis and things like that. Like you might only get say $400,
Right.
And that has to last you your entire leg. And I mean, sometimes you're traveling to not only multiple cities but multiple provinces.
Crazy.
And you've got $400 worth to spend on cabs to get to where you need to go. And then, of course, there's the other times where they provide you a vehicle and you don't even have to worry about it. But I think it's cool that you kind of have to be strategic that way.
Very cool. Paul, what about you?
I've never been a gigantic reality TV fan, but I have watched obviously reality TV. One of the ones I find or I should say actually two for this, because they kind of are the same. Dragon's Den and Shark Tank were I found very interesting to watch for many years. You want to be inspired to do something, whether it's do a podcast or create something that that people can use that they don't regularly have. Like watching that show it's fantastic. You see the failure projects on there too. I've seen one guy that had like a stick and two elastic bands and tried to sell it as like some sort of exercise equipment. And
I've seen that exercise equipment in the store.
and
It's the only ones I buy.
Yeah.
the dragons at the
You
time.
mean they don't work?
Yeah, they don't work. The dragons at the time were like, "Get the hell out of here, you moron!"
Yeah.
Like, because he valued it at like a $3 million valuation for.
Why would they let him on the show?
It was probably to have those controversial, those goofy ones on there.
Yeah,
like,
you need
"Get the
something
hell
that's
outta
going to
here."
be a failure for entertainment purposes, right? It's like watching American Idol where they let the bad singers on and stuff. They need that entertainment value. I mean, there are some people who make money now being terrible at singing. So
Yeah, that's very true. Yeah. Even like some of the guys that guys and girls that they had on there for being the dragons, like Jim Treliving, Brad Treliving's father was on the show for many, many years. Kevin O'Leary, who's been on both the Shark Tank and Dragon's Den.
Mr. Wonderful.
Mr. Wonderful, always been a bit of a
he's famous for being a jerk, right?
Yeah.
And even in American Shark Tank, like he makes a name for himself as being a jerk who doesn't want to help anybody unless it makes him money.
Exactly. His reaction basically to anyone when it comes to like selling a bid for something is like, how's this going to make me money?
Yeah. Yeah.
I think, because I watched Dragon's Den too, I love that show. I think there was probably almost an entire season worth of episodes we watched where I'm not sure he bid on anything.
Yeah.
Tiff and I were like, is this guy, why is he here? Is he going to spend any
Just
cash
to
at
crap
all?
on people.
Yeah.
Yeah, you can see very much that he's only financially driven. You watch any of the side pieces on him, he's on his boat all the time. He's talking about how he's bought his wife all these jewelry pieces and stuff like that. There's nothing more important to this man than money.
Money, yeah.
You could probably somewhat say the same thing about Mark Cuban on Shark Tank. You could tell he's got a bit of a soul to him when it comes to how he engages with the contestants on there. But for him, it's if it's not going to make him money, he's usually out of the race pretty quick.
Yeah. Yeah, I find that a lot of the judges, quote unquote judges on that show, a lot of them are just trying to get, how can this benefit me and make me more money? Because to be fair, they are investing their own money in this company, so they want to be able to get their money back, and obviously then some. So yeah, no, I definitely see the value in that show. I watch it too. I have seen both the American and Canadian versions. I think I like the Canadian version better, only because you can see people on there who you might know or you might have run into at some point in your life. I know somebody who was on the show but never made it on TV. That's why I say, how do they let that person on there? Because I know the kind of people that don't get on there. So it's definitely interesting. But
And I know somebody who was on the show, and it might be different now, but at the time, it was the biggest deal in Dragon's Den history.
You know that person?
He's from Nanaimo.
Oh.
It was fun watching on those. I'm sure you could say the same thing with Amazing Race, where I was talking about the pails and stuff like that. Say the same thing about Dragon's Den and Shark Tank, where you're watching the people fight back against the dragons or the sharks, where they're like, "Well, no, this is going to be something. You're just stupid."
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm worth about $480 million, but I know nothing about money. You're right.
Always hilarious when they do that. Yeah, don't mess with somebody who knows what they're talking about. So my favorite reality show, I have kind of a tie between two, but I'm going to choose one over the other, and I'll tell you what both of them are. The first one that I'm not choosing as my favorite, but I do watch, and I can blame my wife for this, is that we watch Big Brother. We're both a big fan of Big Brother. We watch it every season. We watched both the Canadian and American versions. The Canadian version I found actually to be, it was better than the American version because they had better competitions. But unfortunately, this was the last season of the Canadian version this year, so they'll no longer be making the Canadian version. But they are continuing to do the American version. We have sort of this mindset, and I don't know if this is true or not, but we have this mindset that they have brought some of the producers from the Canadian version over to the American version, because this season it seems some of the games are a little bit better, some of the competitions are a little bit better, and maybe that's why, because they brought the Canadian people over. But again, that's not my favorite. I'm not going to choose that one as my number one. My number one is a show called Alone.
Yes, King!
Alone is a show about 10 people going out into the wilderness and trying to survive. And whoever survives the longest wins $500,000 American. And I say American because there are Canadians and Americans competing. So it's exciting. I've always been a big fan of the show Survivor Man, which is Les Stroud, survivalist, who created his own show basically showing people how to survive in a situation where you might get lost at sea, you might get lost on an island, you might get lost, your plane might crash and you're stuck in the middle of nowhere kind of thing. He shows you how to survive in all these different situations. It's very similar where it's just him by himself. These people on Alone are just by themselves and they have to film themselves surviving. And so if you're into that kind of stuff, I love watching the shows every week, kind of seeing what happens. My favorite part of the whole show, of the whole season, is when they're building their shelters.
Yeah.
Because you just kind of go well, what are they going to do different than what the person did last year? And they all do stuff that's different, and it's so exciting. And then you go I wonder how long this person's going to last with this awesome shelter they're building. And then they last a week because they over-exude themselves after building a log cabin, right? So it's interesting to kind of see what the people who do win, what they do to actually survive. And most of them build tiny little things like lean-tos to get through because they know that they can't over-exude themselves, right? So yeah, it's definitely it's a fun show to watch. And for me, I'm kind of an avid watcher of survival situations. I've always been kind of interested in that. Maybe because I've always thought, my mentality has always been, I need to think of the worst of every situation. So watching something like that, it's what would I do in this situation? And it's funny, I'll watch it and my kids will be like, Daddy, you should try that. And I'll be like, hell no, I'll never put myself in that situation. No amount of money in the world would make me want to do that.
I do like my TV and running toilets.
Well, exactly. And my food whenever I feel like going to the fridge.
Exactly.
These guys literally starve for a long period of time because they're hunting for their food. They're cooking whatever it is they hunt. They're eating literally everything. Squirrels, mice,
Yeah, they definitely deal with some fast food. So
maybe fast and maybe some slow, depending on the time of year. But yeah, absolutely, it's a fun show to watch. And if you've never seen it, the one reason I started watching it in the first place was because the first couple of seasons took place on Vancouver Island, which was really exciting to watch. So, and it really goes to show we do live in that kind of climate where it would be really challenging to survive in, especially in the winter, because here it doesn't snow, it storms, it gets rainy and windy, and I grew up on the west coast of Vancouver Island where literally every day in the wintertime is wind, rain, and more wind.
Take this into consideration, though, too, is that we're actually blocked by the mainland. Like, the Georgia Strait is kind of a cutoff for us. It doesn't get that bad.
Yeah.
Where they are, almost at the northern tip of the island, minus, give or take, well, not take, but probably 25 kilometers, 30 kilometers from the tip of the island, if you do a direct line.
Yeah.
And so they are shielded by nothing.
Yep.
They get the north, right from the Pacific Ocean. They get all the storms. All the wind is terrible.
It's like the northwest, right? Like kind of the western side of the north tip of the island. And yeah, like that's where the worst possible weather and they did that on purpose, obviously. But it's cool that they've started to create survival situations on that show in every season. Now they kind of doing it in a different place, which is exciting. This most recent season is the 11th season, and they did it in the Northwest Territories.
Oh, cool.
It's cool too, like watching the people survive, and you like early on you think to yourself, this guy is gonna definitely win. And then it's like he survives all the way until like near the end, and then last couple of episodes or whatever, he's like, I miss my family, I'm out. Because you're gone for like 100 days. That's 3 months. You're gone from your families, from your comfort of home, and you're literally torturing yourself for 3 months.
Well, and survival's more than just whether you can physically get through, right? There's a psychological, mental aspect, emotional aspect that's probably more draining on you than the physical stuff.
Honestly, it's not even just survival. Like Big Brother's the same way. Yeah. You're away from home for 3 months at a time, and that's a long time to not speak to the people you speak to on a daily basis.
The one thing that I think goes sometimes unnoticed or unappreciated in that show, and you hear it a lot from the American contestants specifically, because there's usually, I think, 2 or 3 Canadians out of the 10, and the rest are from the U.S. or even a couple abroad. But the thing that they identify quickly is how dense and how wet the climate is. Yeah. They can't even get a fire started. They struggle sometimes just to keep warm. Yeah. Never mind cook food.
Yeah, a lot of these guys come from like warm southern climates, and then they're just like so surprised at how different it is, north. And so it's like, a lot of people who do well are people who are from similar climates, and because they know how to survive in those situations. So, well, gentlemen, we've talked about our favorite reality shows. Pretty good show today, I think.
I think it was a great show. We factored in our favorite hockey players, so we got a little bit of everything in there, and I'm just having a good time with you guys.
Yeah, this is a super fun podcast to do, I think.
Yeah, our fans out there, if there's anything that you want us to share, or you want to talk about your favorite players or your favorite shows, anything like that, definitely leave a comment with us on YouTube, on Facebook, whatever. We'd love to engage with you guys.
Yep, you can catch us on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, YouTube, TikTok, all those different social media sites. We are at the Puckn Pod, and we'd love to hear from you. Well, gentlemen, once again, another great show. I want to thank everybody for listening. We will catch you guys in the next one. But before we go, just a reminder, my name is Joe.
My name is Brandon.
And I'm Paul.
We'll see you guys in the next one.